We're told 6 times in the Book of Mormon that the writers could not give us a 1/100th part of all they wanted us to know. So why then did Mormon write so much about wars? 1. He knew the book would be read in a time of war throughout the world. 2. They teach us how to remain Christ-like during times of conflict, never to enter a war offensively, but prepare ourselves and only enter defensively. 3. The wars and strategy between the Nephites and their enemies teach us how to defend ourselves and our families in the battle against Satan for our souls. The Lord approves of people going to war not to shed blood, but in self-defense and to maintain sacred principles of liberty. War is incompatible with Christ's teachings as the gospel of peace, but there are conditions when a Christian may enter into one. To stop an attempt to dominate and deprive another of their agency, loyalty to one's country, or defending a weak nation that is attacked by a strong, ruthless enemy. If we only focus on military strategy in these chapters, we'll miss great counsel on preparation, fortifying ourselves, and staying ahead of our enemy. Every principle and lesson on war can be applied equally well to both physical and spiritual conflicts. Zarahemnah led the Lamanites to battle against the Nephites to bring them into bondage, and the Nephites fought to defend their freedom. The Lamanites and Nephites chose their leaders very differently. Zarahemnah chose Nephite dissenters to preserve their hatred of them, and the Nephites chose leaders with the spirit of prophecy or testimony of Jesus. God raises up great men when they're needed, and Captain Moroni was only 25 years old when he led the Nephite armies. He was an inspirational leader and a visionary man who focused on the righteous goals of his God. He always seemed to be a step ahead of the Lamanites, equipping his army with protective armor and made fortifications that astonished his enemies. Moroni used strategic means to save lives on both sides of the war and wanted to end it with the least amount of blood being shed. He attributed their success to their faith in the Lord, keeping his covenants, and having his power with them. Mormon wrote a tribute to Moroni in Alma 48:17. If all men had been, and were, and ever would be like unto Moroni, behold, the very powers of hell would have been shaken forever. Yea, the devil would never have power over the hearts of the children of men. He was impressed enough to name his own son Moroni also. When the Nephites learned the Zoramites joined with the Lamanites, they didn't just wait for them to attack, but gathered their armies in the land of Jershon, and prepared by putting on their armor, including breastplates, arm shields, helmets, and thick clothing. In our war with Satan, we've been counseled to put on the whole armor of God, or we may find ourselves in a battle for our very souls, clothed like the Lamanites that were naked, save it were a skin which was girded about their loins. The Nephites, forced into a war they did not want, were inspired by righteous motives to support their lands, houses, and their wives and children, that they might preserve them from the hands of their enemies, preserve their rights, privileges, and their liberty, and worship God according to their desires. The Lord said, Ye shall defend your families even unto bloodshed. And they weren't fighting in a foreign land, but defended their own homes and families. They also fought to protect the Ammonites, who would not take up arms and had entered into a covenant, and they would not break it. These anti-Nephi Lehis did not say, I'll keep my covenants so long as I have no problems. How we keep our covenants when life is difficult, dangerous, or inconvenient is how we show the Lord and ourselves that we will keep them at all times. The Ammonites couldn't fight, but helped those who did by getting food to the Nephite armies who battled against their enemies. The Lamanites saw the Nephites' preparation at Jershon, changed their plans, and departed into the wilderness to attack another city. The Nephites demonstrated both works and faith in Christ. Moroni sent men to watch the Lamanites, but also, knowing Alma's prophecies, sent men unto him, desiring he should inquire of the Lord whither the Nephite army should go to defend themselves against the Lamanites. They knew that if they were faithful in keeping God's commandments, he would prosper them in the land, warn them to flee, or prepare for war according to their danger. Amalickiah was a cunning adversary, and the Nephites needed a very intelligent commander to stand up to him. Moroni used stratagems to protect them and gave no opportunity for the enemy to break through their multiple lines of defense of heaps of earth, pickets, towers, and rocks. He used these strategic means to save lives on both sides and wanted to end this war with the least amount of blood being shed. Contrast this with Zarahemnah's attitude, who led the Lamanites, Zoramites, and Amalekites into battle to destroy the Nephites or bring them into bondage and establish a kingdom over all the land. The Lamanites fought with fierceness and anger, and the Nephites were about to shrink and flee. Moroni inspired their hearts with thoughts of their lands, liberty, and freedom. They turned upon the Lamanites and cried with one voice unto the Lord their God. They stood with power, and Moroni immediately commanded his men to stop shedding their blood and told the Lamanite commander, "We do not desire to be men of blood. Ye know you're in our hands, yet we do not desire to slay you." He said they could not destroy the Nephites' faith in Jesus Christ, and God would help them as long as they were faithful. Moroni ordered the Lamanites to give up their weapons and promised never to fight again. Zerahemnah gave them up, but would not make that promise, and Moroni gave their weapons back, so they could defend themselves. He gave his enemy every chance to surrender, but when they refused, he and his men fought valiantly until the Lamanites finally did surrender. After the Lamanite battles, Helaman and his brethren went throughout the land, preaching and reestablishing the church. A cunning man named Amalickiah led a movement to become their king and sought to destroy the church and their liberty. He was devious, bloodthirsty, and did not care who he buried on his way to the throne, and led away the hearts of many who called themselves kingmen. When he failed to gain power, he then went to the Lamanites to become their king, and used them as a means to gain power over the Nephites. Moroni and Amalickiah both made oaths. Amalickiah cursed God and Moroni, swearing with an oath that he would drink his blood, because Moroni kept God's commandments in preparing for the safety of his people. Moroni, on the other hand, swore to defend his people, his rights, and would not suffer that men like Amalickiah should gain power over the people of the church. He ripped his garment and wrote upon it the things for which he was willing to lay down his life. The order of what he wrote was interesting: God, religion, freedom, peace, and family. Each affects the other, but everything begins with our covenants with God. He put it on a pole, dressed in his armor, and prayed for protection and freedom. Moroni's title of liberty was a renewal of covenants previously made with God, and the people were inspired to come from all over the land to fight for their freedom. People can be poisoned by degrees and turned away from the truth. Amalickiah became leader of the Lamanite army and was sent by their king to compel a rebellious part of the army to join a new campaign against the Nephites. They were defeated 2 years before, and the survivors entered into a covenant never to fight them again. These soldiers, who were afraid and refused to fight, chose Lehantai as their leader and defended themselves against Amalickiah and his troops at the top of Mount Antipas. Amalickiah wanted to be king and destroy Lehantai. He sent a secret embassy to ask him to come down the mountain to talk. Lehantai knew this was dangerous and refused to go down. Amalickiah sent 2 more requests and finally went up himself nearly to Lehantai's camp. He sent a 4th message asking Lehantai to come down with his guards and meet with him alone. Lehantai must have thought now he'd be in control. He'd have his guards be close to his camp, and Amalickiah would be alone. So he went down just a little, and Amalickiah offered him command of all the soldiers if he could be second in command. Lehantai agreed to this treacherous plan and became the leader of the army. And then Amalickiah caused that one of his servants should administer poison by degrees to Lehantai, that he died. Satan doesn't usually fully attack us, but entices us to lower our standards just a little. And once we've begun to come down, he also poisons us by degrees. Lehantai should have remembered that there is great power in staying high, in doing what has to be done, and not be enticed away from it to less important things. Nephite dissenters were some of their strongest enemies. Consider the difference between Amalickiah and Moroni. Just as one wicked person can cause much wickedness, one righteous person like Moroni can also inspire much righteousness. Mormon also praised other spiritually powerful men we can look to as great examples. These war accounts and the Nephites' efforts teach us how to fight against Satan's influence to destroy our opportunities for eternal life. 1. They built walls to protect their cities from the Lamanites' attacks. 2. They continually strengthened their defenses. 3. They kept the commandments of God and followed their church leaders. 4. They thanked God for protecting them in battle. 5. The true cause of these wars that allowed the Lamanites to gain power over the Nephites is explained in Alma 50:21. It has been their quarrelings, contentions, murderings, plunderings, idolatry, whoredoms, and their abominations among themselves which brought upon them their wars and their destructions. Mormon emphasized this so that we might learn a lesson. When the kingmen rebelled against the chief judge and sought to overthrow the constitutional form of government, Moroni immediately turned his attention to them. His first care was to cleanse the inner vessel, for he knew that the iniquity of the Nephites was the cause of their destruction, not that of the Lamanites. And 6, the righteous Nephites were prosperous and happy even in times of war. The principles taught in these chapters can protect us and our families from evil and help us have peace in our souls during times of war and tribulation. Alma 50:22 and 23 tells us that there never was a happier time, even though it was right in the middle of this time of war. With the gospel of Jesus Christ, we can be happy anytime and anywhere. And these are chapters 43 through 52 of Alma in the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. I appreciate all the comments you send each week, and I'm glad you enjoy watching these Ponderfun videos. You can help support the creation of these by taking advantage of the $8 monthly special on the Ponderfun Etsy site shown in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, like and share the Ponderfun Facebook page, and share these videos with anyone you think might enjoy them, and I'll keep making new ones. Thanks again for watching, and find some time this week to ponder.